Okay, so now you can see the design a bit more clearly because I've drawn over it. Just a bit darker with a pencil. Obviously I haven't drawn on any of the measurement lines that I used, it does give me just a really clear basis on which to apply the string. So we are going to be using, you should have a few types of string, so you'll have like the thicker string, so you can see here, and then a thinner string. So I'm just going to cut off a little bit of those. You'll find when you're cutting the string with your scissors, if you put the string right down into the V of the scissors and then cut, it will be easier for you to cut than if you're trying to cut it or put the top end of the scissors. Okay, so always use the V end. So I'll just cut off a little bit of the thicker one, and again using the V, a little bit of the thinner one. I'm just going to turn my cutting mat over to my messy side. In fact, I'm just going to do it on the desk. So in particular, if you're in a non-art room, please can you take care with the glue so that we are not creating mess for other people or mess that we need to tidy up. Same if you're in an art room really, just take a little bit of care. So I'm going to be using PVA glue, which mine I've just put onto this piece of plastic here. You'll have a glue pot of some sort, and I am going to use a thin paintbrush to apply the glue to my design. You might have a glue spreader, that's absolutely fine. If you are using a paintbrush, can I please ask that you wash it thoroughly, or you leave it in water and give it back to your teacher. Do not let it dry out, whatever you do. Okay, so just look after it, because once it's got covered in glue and dried out, we won't be able to use it again. Now, when you're looking at your design, the most obvious thing that you might think to do is possibly create outlines. So for instance, where there's a line, you can put your string on. That will mean that when it's stuck down and you put your hand over the surface, that it's raised. Okay, and this raised texture is what we call relief. You can make it with lots of other things to make relief art, such as grout. You can use thick paint. You could paint on top of things. You could just stick things onto a surface. You could just use textile materials, you know, fabrics, and that would create a relief piece of art simply because it's raised off the surface, raised off the plane. Okay, so it's somewhere between a 2D and a 3D piece of art. And once you've got all the strings stuck on, you've got many options. You could print from it, you could cover it in tissue paper and paint it, you could spray paint it, you could cover it in foil, which is what we're going to do. So there's lots of different things you can do once you've got your relief on there. Okay, so like I said, your most obvious thing you might think to do is to create some outlines, which you could do. You could go over all your lines with the string like that. But what I want you to do when you're looking at your design is think about how else you could use the string. So for instance, we could, and I will show you some of these in a moment, but it takes a while to create the string relief, so if I can show you that would be better. Give you a quick idea so you can think. So imagine you have filled in this area completely with string. So the whole of this area is covered in strands of string. You could do that and create a blocked out area of string. You could do that also. But you can see in here that there are, let me find what I'm looking for, elements here, almost where you've got a combination, and here, like a combination of blocked out areas and areas of single lines. And that occurs frequently in the Art Nouveau patterns. Like here, you've got lines in between and then you've got blocked out. So there's definite areas of sort of positive and negative space that you can make with the string, where you are either doing a line or you're blocking it out, and there's a variety of both of those things. You also need to think carefully about areas where you've got layers. So you can see here that that layer is going over this one, and we need to make it feel like that. Now we could just put the block of string all the way through, but we could treat them differently so that they stand out. So I'm going to try and show you what I mean as I apply the string. I'm going to do a tiny little bit first, and then I'll put it onto a time lapse so you can see. Now I wonder if you've managed to think about what the differences might be with the thin and the thick string. So if I'm doing like a more detailed bit here, the most obvious thing that you'll notice is that you're going to be able to capture smaller details using the thinner string. Okay, so clearly make that choice for the smaller areas. However, the larger string, if you want to block out an area, could be useful, and it's also more raised up. You'll see that the shadow from that piece of string is greater than the shadow from this one because it is higher up, because it's thicker. So it might be that on these areas that I want to be above, you know, more in the foreground, and that larger swirl underneath is in the background, possibly I might use the thicker string to show that it's on top of it, that it's bigger than it. Okay, so we could maybe think about that in terms of layering. Like here, I might choose to use the thicker string on this centre section and the thinner string on those sections. Okay, so it's just being a little bit strategic with which string you choose for which aspects of your work, and for which technique you're doing. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to do, just like I said, the central bit, and I think I'm going to look at how on these there's a gap in between. If you can see that, there's a gap in between the different petals, just like there's a slight gap on my design in between the different petals, and there is a gap here. So I'm going to try and keep a gap rather than string to string, if that makes sense. Okay, so because of that, I'm going to start with the thin string. I'm just going to put my glue on this section. It's not going to be a negative if your glue dries out a bit while you get the string ready. So and the way you could be able to assess your skill is how creatively, how carefully, so how controlled is your application of string, and how well have you thought about applying the technique to make it look like Art Nouveau, and to retain your design, like I'm saying about this overlapping and distinguishing the different flower sections. So, you know, have you thought carefully about how to do the string relief and maintain those visual features? Okay, then like I said, I'm going to use the thinner string. I'm going to need my scissors. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure approximately what I'm going to need. Now that will be the longest section because it's on the outside. So what I'm going to do before I stick that one down, going to cut some more pieces of that length so that I know what the largest length was. If my work's symmetrical, I could potentially use that same measurement for this side. Okay, so I'll just do a few to show you. So I'm going to save one for that side over there, and then I'll start to apply these. I might need a bit more glue. You want quite a healthy amount of glue without it going everywhere. It looks as though it's a little bit too long. So as it's so difficult to cut at the top of the scissors, I'm going to take it off and cut it down at the V, otherwise that's going to get all frayed. Okay, so that is fitting beautifully on. I'm just going to make sure that it is fitting the exact curve of the shape. Okay, so often the string will, because it's straight, it will try to go straight again. So you have to watch it because it will try and do that. And then what I'm going to do is use one of the smaller ones, and I'm going to cut off, how much did I take off? Okay, so I'm just going to cut off this much. I'm going to hope that's going to fit as the next layer. So if anything, again, that's probably still slightly too long. Okay, so then I'm going to start to need some smaller sections. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit to make it easier. Okay. So I'm going to need some smaller sections in here to fill in that gap. So I've got an idea about the measurement for now, so I'm just going to have a look and see, probably. Remember, I want to retain that inside line just down here. Probably just need 1 or 2 more now on this piece. In fact, I might be able to use this spare bit here. It's perfect. And I'll probably just put 1 more small bit in there. Okay, so there you can see how I've started and how I've kept this line here. Now I could, to make it really neat, I could put another piece going there to keep that really, really neat. But I'm not sure if I've quite got enough space, so I could put it on top even. And create like a second layer. So what I might do is wait for that to dry and then possibly outline that on the top so that it's got almost like a border. Just to neaten that up a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work now on a time lapse, and then I'll stop and show a few techniques as I go along, but obviously it's a little bit more time consuming for me to do the whole thing in a live video, so I'm going to do a bit on time lapse and then stop, as I say, and show you a few techniques along the way.